Hello everyone, we're going to continue on with book number 1, aka the Sipapu Oddessy. And this segment is called the Rainbow Ballet. One day, following his lessons, which had been of such strong spiritual nature that he was weary from thinking on them, he was restless and it was too early for Fawn to come back to him, so he paced the area nervously. He fidgeted for a while, then did something he had never done before. Went in search of Fawn. His legs had healed, and his walks had become quite long, and he really enjoyed the time spent out in the outdoors. His arm was almost healed, and he was able to use it without discomfort for some tasks. Actually, he felt extremely well. As he strolled along the valley floor, he noticed a side canyon, which had not come to his attention before. He usually walked with Fawn, so decided he likely had been too involved with her to have noticed it. It was a short canyon at the head of the valley, and was a particularly beautiful alcove. The cliffs were sheltering and rounding behind a fin of rock jutting out from the canyon wall, into which the ages had carved a sandstone arch. The front of the arch rested on a higher rock buttress, a butte that was crowned from the level of the arch top by a thin cone-like spire that reached several feet into the air. At the foot of the butte, under the arch, the floods had left a level plain of some yards in diameter which looked like a stage. There had also been some spectacular Indian drawings scattered along the cliff walls as he passed along the trail. Suddenly he was stopped in stunned disbelief. From behind the arch, a gossamer-clad maiden appeared and vaulted to the top of the arch, trailing a segment of living rainbow several yards in length. She flung the gauzy membrane into the air, and it furled and floated around above her as if immune to gravity. The scene in itself was enough to boggle his mind, but still staring with unblinking eyes, he collapsed on a small ledge jutting out beside him. He was staring into the eyes of Diana. Before he could think, a second maiden sprang out to meet Diana. She too carried a swirling rainbow section. The second dancer was Fawn, and Bob went dumb. What can be happening? His mind screamed. Diana and Fawn were then joined by 5 other maidens, which could only have been spirit forms, it appeared to Bob. Each had a rainbow section, and the air of the alcove seemed to shimmer and radiate with veils of vibrant color. Muted music guided and timed the swirling and twirling dance of the spirit maidens. Following Diana, the company made a circle around the top of the alcove, the rainbows floating, furling, coiling in the space above the alcove. The music picked up a beat as the dancers again landed on the arch, and the music changed into a triumphal march, dominated by stringed instruments of some sort. The dancers suddenly drew in the gossamer streams and reissued them in gigantic flashing pom-poms. Every frond of every pom-pom flickered and flashed as the girls gyrated, pirouetted, turned handsprings, and swung back and forth on the arch tip in a frenzy of controlled maneuvers, the pom-poms sweeping up, around, and below the arch until there was an effect of pulsing radiance shooting out in every direction, like the bursting of multicolored fireworks in the sky. In a final exuberant gesture, the spirit dancers cast the pom-poms high into the air and drew them back, changed once again into the rainbow streamers. Diana was the central dancer, and it appeared as if this might be some sort of ritual lesson, more shared than taught. Down again onto the floor of the alcove they tumbled, drawing in the rainbows. Then, in a whirling pirouette, they cast them up where they flared like a cloud of smoke, the free and flickering ends licking like flames from a multicolored fire. The alcove seemed to darken until Bob had the feeling it was night. As the dancers whirled in the alcove, they were suddenly joined by two men from either side of the arch. The men were dressed in tight-fitted costumes, which mostly resembled those of ballet dancers, but the music was definitely what he considered Indian rhythm. Diana and the two men proceeded to perform a most spectacular dance, and after a few minutes, Fawn joined the three. Bob did not recognize the male dancers, as this was a great relief to him. He had experienced about all he could handle. He continued to stare in amazement as the remaining spirit maidens rejoined those on the stage, and 5 additional male dancers joined the fray. The girls drew their streamers into scarves and filled the canyon with flashes of flickering light far more intense than lightning, even if only brief flashes. The music diminished somewhat and then burst forth with more intensity than ever as that portion of the dance wound down to a swirling finish of fluorescence and spectacularly dazzling display of radiance. The light in the canyon seemed to be restored without his noticing at what point it had returned. The dancers flung up the sections of rainbow into the sky as the music changed and fell into the sensuous beat of a hauntingly beautiful waltz. They manipulated the diaphanous cloud into golden lilies taller than themselves. And Bob noted their costumes had changed and were now iridescent silver white with golden trimmings. The golden lilies didn't seem to really touch the floor, but they bent, swayed, and twirled, lifting and swinging the beautiful dancers. Those graceful movements swayed and flashed to the beat of the music. The metallic lilies seemed to somehow support, to enfold, to lift, and display them. Then he realized the lilies were actually the men, and the levitation an illusion. The couples moved in complicated figures, and Diana always seemed to be the star of the show. Bob thought even with the stars in the sky must sway to this beauty and know that these dancers belonged above them. As the music and waltz reached a climax, Diana spun from the formation and snapped the golden lily again into a gauzy segment of color. Leaping to the top of the arch, towing her rainbow, she suddenly dived through the arch, up and over it again, and perched on the tip of the spire. She now appeared to be a violet iris flower within the rainbow, her lovely face peeping out from the upturned petals above the fall petal in front. As she perched atop the spire, the whole alcove seemed to fill with a soft suspended mist. The fragrance came to Bob, and the freshness seemed literally to touch his skin. Suddenly, the aroma seemed like that of the potion he had received his first few nights in the village, and he was completely lost in the smell of the dance. Diana flicked out her rainbow fragment, almost invisible in the glory of the mist, as Fawn, a pink iris, came up through the arch, leaving it swathed in a changing rosy glow, and wheeling in close to Diana. The colors merged and seemed to fill the stage. This was all so sudden that Bob was not surprised to see the purples run up the rainbow on the edge as the pink came down the side, like they were being painted by a gigantic watercolor brush strokes. The music changed again, this time to vibrant, haunting drums. One by one, the other dancers entered the archway, each having the appearance of a varied colored flower, with their matching streamers floating about them. The stage was splashed with color, and as the men rejoined the dancers, Bob was held spellbound by the rhythm and coordination of their movements. The dance was spectacular as the drums reached a thunderous reverberation that seemed to control the dance and all the earth around it. The dancers raised their rainbow streamers, which seemed to merge into one, stretching away to the farther canyon rim. The drumbeat then changed once more, and it was as if Bob caught in a warning, a feeling of disaster in the thunder, a foretelling of doom. Diana and Fawn were somehow changed into yellow spider-web-wrapped forms, towing their rainbows into position. They turned apart and perched on the farther canyon rims opposite each other. The other dancers sank, still circling, and the sweet aroma of moistness of the air sank with them. As Bob watched Diana and Fawn spread their arms and, holding the rainbow in their fingertips, pulled it tight, flipped a couple of times, and flung it into the sky. The drums screamed in protest. The rainbow arched up and, like a ripple in a pool, disappeared as the drums stopped mid-beat. Silence was absolute. Movement ceased. Only the hawk circling above continued its endless glide across the silence of the heavens. Bob sat in wonder, oblivious of everything around him. He failed to even notice the arm which was placed around his shoulders from behind. His being still throbbed to the beat of the drums, his mind filled with the flashes of half-formed ideas which tumbled in an incoherent kaleidoscope. Gradually his body quieted, and his mind began to find its focus again. Now he could comprehend the message the medicine man had given him, that he must purify himself, purge himself of this mortality, and become pure spirit, to be able to move into the beyond through the Sipapu. To obtain that excellence, he realized he must undergo a metamorphosis as complete as the chrysalis produces as a butterfly from the larvae. Death was one answer, but there had to be an alternative. To believe that was the only way was oversimplification. He had watched as Diana died in the river, and yet there she was. How could it be that she was here? His earthly being was overcome, and yet he knew he had moved into a higher spiritual existence. He would gladly die for Fawn, but that didn't seem to be the solution. The medicine man had told him that anything was possible with faith, but he knew his faith didn't include letting control of his circumstances completely out of his own hands. Death was surely more of an ending than a beginning in his book. He had always considered life after death a total whistling in the dark to relieve the streaks of fear of the inevitable. Another thing that had always lived in his belief was that one died when his time came and not before, and never was it acceptable to die by any controlled method. He was convinced by his experience with the after effects of watching the dance that unless he divested himself of this earthly humanness, his mortality, he could never attain the level of Fawn, even if he did go through the Sipapu with her. He carefully reviewed what the medicine man had told him. It seemed that there was a slim chance that he could purify himself with meditation and prayer, and he was ready as he ever would be to give it a try. He turned to look for Fawn to tell her that tomorrow he would go alone into the mountains and make himself worthy of her, but she was not there. Instead, he looked directly into the eyes of Steve. And that'll be the end of this segment.